Today we're going to take a look at different ways that we can both echo and store strings and groups of variables. And to do that, we'll take a look at a couple different functions. So today I'm going to be working in CodeRunner because we're going to be running a lot of PHP. So first, we know that we can echo out a string. We've known that for a while. So I can open up PHP, echo, my name is Jeffrey. And if I run that, sure enough, we get my name is Jeffrey. We already know this. And we also know, though, that we can store that string within a variable, greeting, like so. And now we can echo greeting and get the exact same effect. Good. But what if rather than hard coding the name Jeffrey, that's actually going to be a value that we grab from maybe a database or the query string within the URL? We want to embed that value. Okay, well, let's say name equals Joe. And this variable will represent some kind of dynamic data. Again, maybe we're grabbing it from the query string. Maybe we're fetching some information from a database and we're grabbing the user's name. Just assume that for now we're hard coding this value in, but in a real world application, it will come from some unspecified source. All right, so now we know that we can do my name is name. And as long as we're using double quotes, we get to take advantage of what's known as interpolation. And interpolation is just a bit of jargon to mean that we can embed variables. Remember, if we change these to single quotes, that's not going to run because we can't use interpolation. But now, what if I want to add my age? And we can say my name is name and I am, and then the age. Currently, I'm 27 years old, so I can say, and I am 27. We're still going to grab that, but now 27 too is going to be grabbed from something like a query string. And maybe you don't want to store age within a variable as well. You could, but maybe you want to be able to do something like using a superglobal. And this is something we haven't covered just yet, but this is simply a way that you can grab values from the URL, and I'll explain that more. So first I want to note that actually this is a little bit dangerous. When you're grabbing information that anyone can set and you're echoing it without cleaning it up, that can be dangerous. But for now, I don't want you to worry about that. We're going to cover security in quite a bit of detail in the future. So what you see here though is we're quickly getting to a point where this isn't going to work. What we could do is wrap it within braces so that we can execute PHP or reference items within an array. But many times what you end up with is a very dirty string. So there are ways that we can actually improve this by using a printf function. So consider this. Print, we know print r to print the contents of an array or object, but there's also this printf function. Now the way printf function works is we're going to give it a string. So once again, my name is Jeffrey and I am 27. But now what we can do is we can bind variables to this string. So watch what happens if I use this new notation, %s. Now I've replaced my name with %s, and s stands for string. Next, I'm going to go to 27, and I'm going to replace that with d, because that will represent a number or digit. So now we have this cleaner string. We can easily see where we're popping in the values. And now we're simply going to bind those values. So I can do name, age. Now what printf will do is not only will it bind those variables to the string, but it will also print it to the screen. So if I reload this, you'll see, yep, my name is Joe and I am 27. And if we want to change that value, of course we can. So many times you'll find that this is the cleanest way that you can group variables within some string that is either output, or we can also assign it to a variable using a slightly different function. So why don't we create a new variable, and I will call it greeting as we did before. But this isn't exactly what we would want. If I run it again, yeah, we're still getting my name is Joe and I'm 35, but if we echo greeting, we're actually getting this value 26, and that represents the number of characters. So that's not what we want. Instead, we want this alternate function called s, string printf. And the only difference, it's the exact same thing, it accepts the same number of parameters. The only difference is that is no longer printed to the screen, it's stored within the variable that you assign it. So now if I echo greeting, you'll see that we get my name is Joe. And just to prove that is the case, if we comment it out, now sprintf is not printing it to the screen. If we remove it, it is. If we add it on, now the value is being assigned to a variable. So let's take a look at another example. Maybe we want to use printf, and we're going to build up some strings. So we'll say today is, and then we want the month. So we'll say month, comma. So that could be today is January, and then we will have the day. So I will do %s to represent the day and then followed by like the 5th or the 3rd, things like that, rather than just 3. So we have today is month, then the day, then we want the year, which can be a digit, because that would be 2012, 2013. So now we have this string, we simply need to bind the variables to it. So now we could say today is, and once again, these values would probably be determined dynamically. And there's actually ways that we can create dates within PHP. We're just not quite there yet. So for now, I'm going to hard code this in. So the month will be June that we're going to bind. The next value is going to be the 7th in this case. And then finally, we're going to bind the year, which is 2012. So now if I run that, we get today is June 7th, 2012. So if you're still thinking at this point, well, what is the advantage to this? Why don't we just embed today is June 7th, 2012? And again, the reason is because these values will be determined dynamically. You may be getting that value from a database. In this case, we're echoing out today, but it could be something like this post was made on, and then you're binding the information. So maybe this is a blog and you're figuring out when the blog was posted, and then you want to provide that information more in human speak. Rather than just posted along with the date, you want it to be a little bit more readable. This is one way you could do it. So you have printf. If you need that value on a variable, you could say posted equals sprintf, and then you have that new formatted string stored within the variable posted. Now we also have the inverse of sprintf or printf, and that is scanf. Again, these are weird function names. I'm showing you these now because they are probably the least readable of all the ones that you will encounter. Most of them are fairly readable, such as strlen. Well, that means the length of the string or the number of characters. So we're going to knock out just a couple of the ones that confused me the most at first. All right, so we have this new function, scanf. Now that is essentially the inverse of printf. So I'll give you an example here. Let's say, once again, this post was made on June, but this time we're hard coding those values in rather than binding them. June 7th, 2012. And I just realized in the previous example, I placed the comma in the wrong area, but that's okay. All right, so now we have this formatted string. And what we want to do is take specific values within this string and convert them to variables. And this will happen a lot. You have this string and you need to parse that string so that you can capture specific values within variables. Well, scanf is one way that you can do it, just as long as you know what you're doing. So scanf will accept a couple parameters. The first is going to be the string that you're working with. The second parameter is essentially going to be, how are we going to parse this? Well, I'll give you an example. Within quotes, I'm simply going to type %s to represent a string. So essentially, that's going to capture as many letters as possible. It's not going to capture spaces or numbers, just letters. So let's save that, and if I run it, of course, we're not going to get anything. And that's because we need to capture those results. So we will store it within an array called results, and we will print our results. Now I'm going to run it, and we get this array in response, and the first item within the array is this. So notice that it began at the beginning, and because we specified s, it captured as many letters, uppercase or lowercase, as possible. If we were instead to change this to d for digit, and I run it, now we're not going to get anything at all, because it looked at the beginning of the string, and it didn't see anything at all. So now we're going to parse this, and the way we're going to parse it is by writing, and you know what, I'm going to make it a little bit easier just because I don't have much real estate. Let's just make it the month, day, and year. And now what we want to do is take June, place that within a variable, take the day, place that within a variable, and take the year and place that within a variable. So the way we're going to do that is begin with %s. Now if I run it, okay, we've got June, that's good. Next we have the day, but there's actually numbers and letters here. So let's try it with %s and run it. Now we get 7th and the comma, but we don't want that. We just want 7th. So what we need to do instead is we can use this kind of play on regular expressions. And this is normally known as character classes. So within brackets, I can say anything that is not a comma. So within a character class, this symbol right here means not. So what we're essentially doing here is we're saying, well, next we're going to look for a sequence of letters, and what we're looking for is anything that is not a comma. So we start here. Is this a comma? No, that's not a comma. All right, we'll add that. Continue on. continue on. Then it gets to this point and it's saying, oh, this is a comma. I don't want a comma, so I'm going to stop right there. All right, so now let's run it one more time. Now we have 7th. We're going to tack on the comma. Remember, the comma is not being matched. The only things that are being stored within variables are what you set to %s, or in this case, percentage, and then the character class. And the final thing we want is the year, so I will place that within %d for the year. Now I can run that, and we have June 7th, 2012. Now there's actually 2 different ways that we can capture this information, because what we've done here is we've parsed this date and we've stored it within an array, but we actually want June to be within a variable called month. We want the year to be within a variable called year. All right, well, there's 2 ways to do that. The first way is to use list, and this is a new function that you haven't learned yet. So in this case, scanf is returning an array. That function returns an array containing your matches, and we are storing that within the results variable. But now we're going to use this new function, list. Now the way list will work is we're going to provide it some named variables, month, day, year. And the way that's going to work is what is returned from this, the first item within that returned array will be assigned to month. The second item within that returned array will be assigned to day, and the third to year. So here is the results from before. Notice the first item is the month. That is assigned to month. The second item right here is the day, so that gets assigned to day. And the third item is the year, so that gets assigned to year. So now we can do things like this. Echo month, there's June, echo day, there's 7th, and echo year, 2012. So if this is still confusing to you, think of it this way. List name age equals array Jeffrey 27. So now I can echo name, and notice we're getting my name, and we can echo age 27. We're simply providing this list function an array. In this case, we're setting it right here, and we're taking those items in the array and are assigning it to the variables that we provide within here. And you don't have to specify all of them. So maybe I only want to grab Jeffrey. Okay, well in that case, I only need to provide one. If I echo out name, yes, we're getting Jeffrey, but then there's nothing else to echo out. That's still going to work. You only add those if you need to capture those values as well. Okay, so let's uncomment this, run it again. That is one way to do it. There's also one last way to do it. I'll comment this out. The scanf function also gives us the ability to assign each of these matches to variables as parameters. So in this case, the first one, of course, was the month. So I'm going to assign that to month. The second one is the day, so I'll do day. And the final one is the year. So now, once again, we get the exact same effect. Month, day, and year. And that's going to do it for this lesson. So we took a look at 3 functions. First, we reviewed printf, and that is a way to print information to the screen, but be able to format it and bind variables to a string. We also reviewed sprintf, or some people call it sprintf, and that is the same thing, but it assigns the string to a variable rather than printing it to the screen. And then finally, we looked at scanf, which is essentially the inverse of the others. With scanf, we provided a string, and now we're going to parse that string into variables. Whereas with printf, we're taking existing variables and binding it to a string wherever we specify. All right, that does it. In the next lesson, we're going to discuss functions, which you can think of as little reusable bits of code. I'll see you then.